Hello everyone, my name is Roy Recalman, representing the fourth group which will discuss the chapter 4 of social, political, and cultural issues in Philippine history. But before we proceed to our first main topic, I would like to give you some introduction about this chapter. This chapter is dedicated to enduring issues in Philippine society, which history could lead a hand understand and hopefully proposing solutions. These topics include the mandated discussion in the Philippine Constitution, policy on agrarian reform and taxation. It is hoped that this discussion will help us propose recommendation or solution to present the problem based on our understanding of root causes and now we anticipate future scenarios in the Philippine settings. Evolution of the Philippines Constitution. Constitution is an aggregate of fundamental principles or established precedents that constitution the legal basis of polity, organization, or other type of entity and commonly determine how that entity is to be governed. In short, constitution is a set of rules that guide the country or state or the other political organization. Ang constitution ay parang libro na kung saan nakapaloob lahat ang mga gagawin ng gobyerno sa kanyang mga nasasakupan. Kasama dito ang pagpapatupad ng batas. Ang batas ay nakahati sa mga branches. Why is important for us to have a constitution that maintain a law and order? Just imagine our country without the constitution. Our country will be at house and people will be denied by our rights. So it's really important for us to all be constitution. Impose rules and regulation. It protects individual rights and freedom. Limit the power of government officials. Constitution of Biak na Bato. Let us know what is Biak na Bato. Biak na Bato is a Tagalog word for cleft rock. It is the name of place in the mountain of Bulacan province where in 1897 the insurgent forces under General Emilio Aguinaldo retreated from the advancing Spanish army. In 1897, Constitution of Biak na Bato. The Constitution of Biak na Bato was the provisional construction of the Philippine Republic during Philippine Revolution and was promulgated by the Philippine Revolutionary Government on 1 November 1897. The Constitution borrowed from Cuba was written by Isabela Artacho and Felix Ferrer in Spanish and later on translated into Tagalog. In 1897 Constitution of Biak na Bato. The Constitution of Biak na Bato was provisional constitution of Philippine Republic during the Philippine Revolution and was proclaimed by the Philippine Revolution Government noong November 1, 1897. The Constitution borrowed from Cuba na isinulat ni Isabela Artacho and Felix Ferrer sa Spanish. Sa kalaunan ay itinranslate ito sa Tagalog. The organs of the government under Constitution were the Supreme Council, which was vested with the power of the Republic, headed by President and four department secretaries, the Interior, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, and War. The Consejo Supremo de Gracia y Justicia, Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, which was given the authority to make decisions and affirm or disapprove the sentences rendered by other courts and to dedicate rules for the administration of justice. And the Assembly de Representantes Assembly of Representatives, which was to convene after the revolution to create a new constitution and to elect new council of government and representative of the people. The constitution of Biak na Bato was never fully implemented since through the Pact of Biak na Bato was signed between the Spanish and the Philippine Revolution Army. Primary sources: Preamble of the Biak na Bato Constitution, the separation of the Philippines from the Spanish monarchy and their formation into an independent state with its own government called Philippine Republic, has been the end of suit by the revolution in the existing war begun on the 24th of August 1896, and therefore in the name of by the power delegated by the Filipino people, interpreting faithful their desire and ambition, being represented of revolution in meeting of Biak na Bato, November 1, 1897, unanimously adopted the following articles for the Constitution of the States. And that would be all. Thank you and God bless.
Today, everyone, I'm Rose Ann Santos. I'm here today to talk about Malolos Constitution. 1899, Malolos Constitution. It was written by Felipe Calderon Huayroca and Felipe Buencamino as an alternative to a pair of proposals to the Malolos Congress by Apolinario Mabini and Pedro Paterno. After a lengthy debate in the latter part of 1898, it was enacted on January 21, 1899. Felipe Gonzalez Calderon Huayroca, also known as Felipe G. Calderon, April 4, 1868 to June 6, 1908, was a Filipino lawyer, politician, and intellectual, known as the father of the Malolos Constitution. Felipe Gonzalez Calderon is the father of the Malolos Constitution. Felipe Buencamino, August 23, 1848 to February 6, 1929. Accounts about Felipe Buencamino Sr. in Philippine history describe him quite harshly for shifting allegiance too quickly and then managing to obtain favor and positions of power and authority. He succeeded Juan N. Aragon in 1913 as Grand Master of the Regional Grand Lodge of the Philippines, of the Grand Orient Espanyol. This was the critical period when the All-American Grand Lodge of the Philippine Island, organized in 1912, was campaigning to assert its legitimacy in the country and in the international Masonic community by claiming that the Philippines was Masonically free. As Regional Grand Master, Buencamino should have pursued a Masonic protest to protect the sovereignty of Filipino Lodge. He did not because he was extremely pro-American and declared, "I am an American, and all the money in the Philippines, the air, the light, and the sun, I consider American." Next picture, Gregorio S. Araneta and Pedro Paterno. Gregorio Soriano Araneta ay isang abogado at politiko na naging pinakabatang Associate Justice sa kasaysayan ng Korte Suprema at unang Pilipino na humawak ng mataas na posisyon noong panahon ng pamahalaang Amerikano. Next is Pedro Alejandro Paterno y Vera Ignacio was a Philippine politician and famous for being a turncoat. He was also a poet and a novelist. His intervention on behalf of the Spanish led to the signing of the Pact of Biak na Bato on December 14, 1897, an account of which he published in 1910. Next is Apolinario Mabini. He decided to draft a constitution and he is also the Prime Minister of the revolutionary government. Apolinario Mabini, 1864 to 1903. Siya ay kilala bilang dakilang paralitiko at utak ng revolusyon. Siya ay pangalawa sa 8 anak nina Inocencio Mabini at Dionisia Maranan sa baryo Talaga, Tanauan, Batangas. When he was young, he was seen to have extraordinary intellect and passion for learning. In Manila in 1881, he obtained a partial scholarship which allowed him to get an education at the College of San Juan de Letran. He completed his Bachelor of Arts in 1887. He also studied law at the University of Santo Tomas from 1888 to 1894. Next picture is Emilio Aguinaldo, was a Filipino revolutionary, statesman, and military leader who is officially recognized as the first and the youngest president of the Philippines, and the first president of a constitutional republic in Asia. How did the Malolos Constitution start? Following the Declaration of Independence from Spain on June 12, 1898, by the revolutionary government, a Congress was opened in Malolos, Bulacan Province on September 15, 1898, to draw up a constitution for the first Philippine Republic. The Basilica at Barsoin was filled with delegates and spectators. Next is, what did Malolos Constitution provided? The Constitution was specifically provided for a safeguards against abuses and enumerated the national and individual rights not only of the Filipinos and of the aliens. Let's proceed to legislation. Major legislation. Declaration on Independence, enactment, June 12, 1989. Ratification, September 29, 1898. Declaration of War against United States, enactment, June 2, 1899. Ratification, June 2, 1899. Malolos Constitution, approved on June 21, 1899, promulgated on January 22, 1899. Next is, this is the picture of the capital of the Philippines Republic at Malolos, erected 1895. To the next picture, this is General Aguinaldo and 10 of the delegates to the first assembly that passes the Constitution in the Barian Church in Malolos. To the last picture, this is proclamation of Aguinaldo as leader of revolutionary government at Malolos, January 23, 1899. This is the last page about Malolos Constitution. Malolos Constitution, formally established with the proclamation of the Malolos Constitution on January 21, 1899, of President Emilio Aguinaldo by the American forces on March 23, 1901, in Palanan, Isabela, which effectively dissolved the First Republic. The Constitution as a whole is a monument to the capacity of the Filipinos to chart their very own course along democratic lines. In a period of storm and stress, it is a symbolized the ideals of a people who had emerged from the dark age into the light of reason. So again, this is the topic of Malola's Constitution. Thank you for listening and God bless.
And now, let's talk about 1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. 1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. It is worth mentioning that after the Treaty of Paris, the Philippines was subject to the power of the United States of America, effectively the new colonizers of the country. From 1898 to 1901, the Philippines would be placed under a military government until a civil government would be put into place. Sinasabi rito na pagkatapos raw ng Treaty of Paris o kasunduan sa Paris, ang Pilipinas raw ay napailalim sa kapangyarihan ng Estados Unidos ng Amerika na siyang naging bagong colonizer ng bansa. Mula taong 1898 hanggang 1901, ang Pilipinas raw ay ilalagay sa ilalim ng isang pamahalaang militar hanggang sa makapagtalaga ng isang pamahalaang sibil. Two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to have qualities of constitutionality. The first act was Philippine Organic Act of 1902. It is the first organic act or organic law for the Philippine Islands that provided for the creation of a popularly elected Philippine Assembly. The act specified that legislative power would be vested in a bicameral legislature composed of the Philippine Commission as the upper house and the Philippine Assembly as lower house. Ang Philippine Organic Act raw ay ang kauna-unahang organikong batas para sa Philippine Island na siyang naglaan para sa paglikha ng isang tanyag na tinatawag nating Philippine Assembly. Tinukoy rin ng batas na ito ang kapangyarihang pambatasan ay bibigay raw sa isang bicameral legislature na binubuo ng Komisyon ng Pilipinas bilang pinakamataas na kapulungan at ang Philippine Assembly naman bilang mababang kapulungan. The key provision of the act included a Bill of Rights for Filipinos and the appointment of 2 non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines as representative that the United States House of Representatives. The second act was Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916. It is commonly referred to as John's Law, which modified the structure of the Philippine government through the removal of the Philippine Commission, replacing it with a Senate that served as the upper house and its members elected by the Filipino voters, the truly elected legislature. Ang Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916 ay tinatawag ring Batas Jones, na siyang nagbago ng istrukturan ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas sa pamamagitan ng pag-aalis o pagtanggal ng Philippine Commission, na siyang pinalitan naman ng isang Senado na nagsilbing mataas na kapulungan at mga miyembro nito na inihalal ng mga botanteng Pilipino. Sinasabi rin na ito rin ang batas na siyang nagpahayag ng layunin ng Estados Unidos na wakasan na ang kanilang soberanya sa Pilipinas at kanilang kilalanin ang kalayaan ng Pilipinas hanggang maitatag ang matatag na pamahalaan. Noong 1932, sa pagsisikap ng Philippine Independence na pinapangunahan ni Sergio Osmeña at Manuel Rojas, ipinasa ng Kongreso ng Estados Unidos ang Hair Hose Cutting Act na may pangakong pagkakaloob ng kalayaan ng mga Pilipino. Ang panukalang batas na ito ay tinutulan ng Pangulo ng Senado na si Manuel L. Quezon, na siya naging dahilan upang tanggihan ng Senado ng Pilipinas ang panukalang ito. By 1934, another law, the Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as the Philippine Independence Act, was passed by the United States Congress that provided authority and defined mechanisms for the establishment of a formal constitution by a constitutional convention. The members of the convention were elected and held their first meeting on 30 July 1934 with Claro M. Recto unanimously elected as president. The Constitution was crafted to meet the approval of the United States government and to ensure that the United States would live up to its promise to grant independence to the Philippines. Taong 1934, isa pang batas ang pinanukala at ito'y tinawag na Tidings-McDuffie Act or Batas ng Tidings-McDuffie, na kilala rin bilang Batas ng Kalayaan ng Pilipinas. Ito'y naipasa ng Kongreso ng Estados Unidos na siyang nagbibigay ng otoridad para sa pagtatatag ng isang formal na konstitusyon ng isang konstitusyonal na konstitusyon. Ang mga member daw ng konbensyon ay nihalal at ginanap ang kanilang unang pagpupulong noong ika-30 ng Hulyo 1934 na nagkakaisa na nahalal bilang Pangulo si Claro M. Recto. Ang konstitusyon ay ginawa upang matugunan ang pag-apruba ng gobyerno ng Estados Unidos at upang matiyak na ang Estados Unidos ay tutupad sa pangakong ito na magkakaloob ng kalayaan sa Pilipinas. Primary sources preamble of the 1935 Commonwealth. The Filipino people imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody their ideals, conserve and develop the patronymy of the nation, promote the general welfare, and secure to themselves and their posterity the blessings of independence under a regime of justice, liberty, and democracy, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution. The Constitution created the Commonwealth of the Philippines, an administrative body that governed the Philippines from 1935 to 1946. It is transitional administration to prepare the country toward its full achievement of independence. It originally provided for a unicameral National Assembly with a president and vice president elected to a 6-year term without re-election. Sabi rito, ang sambayan ng Pilipino raw ay humingi ng tulong upang magtatag ng isang pamahalaan na kakatawan sa kanilang mga mithiin, pangalagaan at paunlarin ang ang patrimonya ng bansa at itaguyod ang pangkalahatang kapakanan at tiyakin sa kanilang sarili ang mga pagpapala ng kalayaan sa ilalim ng isang rehimen ng katarungan, kalayaan at demokrasya at pagpapahayag sa konstitusyong ito. Ang konstitusyon daw ay lumikha ng Commonwealth of the Philippines o isang administratibong katawan na namamahala sa Pilipinas mula 1935 hanggang 1946. Ito raw ay isang transitional na administrasyon upang maihanda ang bansa tungo sa buong tagumpay nito sa kalayaan. Ito raw ay orinal na naglaan para sa isang unicameral na pambansang asembleya na may isang pangulo at vice-presidente na inihalal sa isang 6 na taong termino ng walang muling halalan. Sinunod ito noong 1940 upang magkaroon ng bicameral Congress na binubuo ng isang Senado at isang kapulungan ng mga kinatawan. Gayon din ang paglikha ng isang independenteng komisyon sa elektoral at nilimitahan ang termino ng panunungkulan ng Pangulo at Vice-Presidente sa 4 na taon na may isang muling eleksyon. Ang mga karapatan sa pagboto ay orihinal na ibinibigay sa mga lalaking mamamayan ng Pilipinas na 21 taong gulang o higit pa at marunong bumasa at sumulat. Ito ay kalaunan ay pinalawig sa kababaihan sa loob ng 2 taon pagkatapos ng pagtibayin ng konstitusyon. Habang ang pangingibabaw na impluwensya sa konstitusyon ng Amerika, mayroon din itong mga bakas ng saligang batas ng Malotos, mga konstitusyon ng Aleman, ng German, Espanyol at Mexican, mga konstitusyon ng ilang bansa sa Timog Amerika at ang hindi nakasulat na konstitusyon ng Ingles. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Constitutional Convention on February 8, 1935, and ratified by the U.S. President Franklin B. Roosevelt on March 25, 1935. March 25, 1935. Elections were held in September 1935, and Manuel L. Quezon was elected President of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth was briefly interrupted by the events of the World War II, with the Japanese occupying the Philippines. Afterward, upon liberation, the Philippines was declared an independent republic on July 4, 1946. Sabi rito, ang draft ng konstitusyon ito ay inaprubahan ng Constitutional Convention noong 8 ng Pebrero taong 1935 at niratipikahan ng US President Franklin B. Roosevelt noong March 25, 1935. Ang mga halalan daw ay ginanap noong Setyembre taong 1935 at si Manuel L. Quezon ang nahalal bilang Pangulo ng Commonwealth. Ang Commonwealth raw ay panandaliang naalantala ng mga pangyayari sa ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig na sinakop ng mga Hapones ang Pilipinas. Pagkatapos nito, ang Pilipinas ay diniklara na isang malayang republika noong ika-4 ng Hulyo 1946.
1973 Constitutional Authoritarianism Truth Proclamation Number 1081 on September 21, 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos placed the entire country under martial law. Martial law was declared in the country because of the violence of the demonstration, disruption of classes in Manila, clashes of the students between the students and officers of the law. Truth Convention, the proposed 1973 Constitution was approved on November 29, 1972. Presidential Decree Number 73. It was proposed to be ratify or reject the proposed Constitution on November 30, 1973 through plebiscite. Citizens' assemblies were held from January 10 to 15, 1973. On January 17, 1973, President Marcos issued a proclamation announcing that the proposed constitution had been ratified and the constitution it was supposed to introduce a parliamentary-style government which was vested in a unicameral National Assembly with members being elected to 6 years term. The President would serve a 6 years term and would be re-elect to an unlimited number of terms. The President was to be elected as a symbolic of ceremonial head of state chosen from members of National Assembly. Executive power was relegated to the Prime Minister, who was also the head of the government and
Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The Prime Minister was also elected from National Assembly. The Constitution was amended several times. In 1976, citizen assemblies once again decided to allow the continuation of martial law as well as approve amendments president to also become the prime minister and to continue to exercise legislative powers until martial law was lifted. In 1981, the parliamentary system was formally modified to a French-style semi-presidential where executive power was restored to the president. After all the amendments introduced, the 1973 Constitution was merely a way for the President to keep executive powers, abolish the Senate, and by any means never acted as a parliamentary system, instead functioned as an authoritarian presidential system.
1987 Constitution after martial law. President Corazon Aquino's government had three options regarding the Constitution. These are 1. Revert to the 1935 Constitution, 2. Retain the 1973 Constitution, 3. And be granted the power to make reforms or start anew and break from the vestiges of a disgraced dictatorship. According to the President herself, should be truly reflective of the aspirations and ideals of the Filipino people. In March 1986, President Aquino proclaimed a transitional constitution to last for a year while a constitutional commission drafted a permanent constitution. The transitional constitution is also called the Freedom Constitution, and it maintained many provisions of the old one, including in rewriting from the presidential right to rule by decree. In 1986, a constitutional convention was created. It composed of 48 members appointed by the president. This convention drew up a permanent constitution and largely restoring the setup abolished by Marcos in 1972, and also it was officially adopted on February 2, 1987. The Constitution begins with a preamble and 18 self-contained articles. It established the Philippines as a democratic republican state where sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. It allocates governmental powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government. The legislative power resides in a Congress divided into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Aside from exclusive power of legislation, Congress may also declare war through a two-thirds vote in both upper and lower houses. The Philippine court system is vested with the power of the judiciary and composed of a Supreme Court and lower courts as created by law. The Supreme Court is a 15-member court appointed by the President without the need to be confirmed by Congress. The Constitution also established three independent constitutional commissions, namely the Civil Service Commission, a central agency in charge of government personnel, the Commission on Elections, mandated to enforce and administer all election laws and regulations, and the Commissions on Audit, which examines all funds, transactions, and property accounts of the government and its agencies. The Office of the Ombudsman was created to investigate complaints that pertain to public corruption, unlawful behavior of public officials, and other public misconduct. Only the House of Representatives can initiate the impeachment of the President, members of the Supreme Court, and the other constitutionally protected public officials such as the Ombudsman.